Hey there, welcome aboard. My name is Trey Hoberson, and I am the founder of HealthReconnected.com and Health Reconnected Technologies. You want to learn more about me? Scan this QR code. It'll take you to the About page at our website and kind of give you the rundown of what I'm about as well as my credentials. Now, the presentation I'm getting ready to do for you is going to be life altering, and it has to do with the symbolism or the significance of the Vesica Pisces. What I want you to understand is the powerful organizations in the world that care about this geometry very much so. So, the United States, the most powerful government, and the Catholic Church, most powerful religion. Both of these organizations greatly appreciate and freely flaunt the symbolism of the Vesica Pisces. The Vesica Pisces is what happens when you take two circles that are the same size, and when those two circles overlap, that overlapping part right here, that's what a Vesica Pisces is. It's an almond-like shape. It's called the fish bladder, is what it translates into. And it's the idea of bridging the physical with the spiritual, the masculine with the feminine. So it's like bringing two understandings together where those understandings overlap. That's the concept of light. Now, this obelisk right here, this is an ancient Egyptian symbol. It's a petrified pillar of light, and it's used as a sundial. So you can see the shadow that it casts here, and the shadow can help you determine what season of the year it is, what time of the day it is. So this has to do with the light, just like this almond-like figure. So this is not some kind of coincidence that you're seeing this obelisk in the middle of this Vesica Pisces. Now let's check out Vatican City. So this is St. Peter's Square, and you can see the design of St. Peter's Square creates two circles. These two circles overlap to create the Vesica Pisces, and they too have an obelisk positioned within the Vesica Pisces. This obelisk, again, very important in Egyptian theology and relates to the light or complete understanding of how these dualities come together. This ancient complex was designed to preserve these two circular patterns that are organized by Vesica Pisces. These patterns are very familiar. This is the egg of life. This is the seed of life. This is the feminine. This is the masculine. And when you bring these two patterns together, what they do is they bring conscious and unconscious control together. So the Giza Pyramid complex is literally the light that explains the absolute truth of how it is that we can exist both consciously and unconsciously. Now, when you look at the position of the Sphinx, this Vesica Pisces was used to determine how far away it would be, as well as the pitch of the pyramid itself that it's connected to. And what this is doing is it's showing that two things are connected. So this pyramid is the idea of the creation that we share. And you can see that it all comes all the way down to the lion's body. So the Sphinx is the body of a lion with the head of a man. Now, the body is the unconscious. It's like the animal part of us. It's our primal instincts. It's what's happening within. It's when we feel hungry. It's when we feel tired. It's when we feel aroused. That's our animalistic instinct, and that has to do with this unconscious pattern. Then you can see that the smaller pattern, the 17%, well, that fits perfectly right here over the human head. This is also very symbolic. So somebody like me that understands the light is born every 1980 years. And I happen to be the guy that shows up and says, "Hey, world, I'm going to show you some things that's going to change everything you thought you knew because now we're going to understand what we truly are." We exist within a mathematical construct. There's no way to sugarcoat that. And what we believe to be conscious choice is really just a backseat to this pattern right here, this unconscious pattern unfolding. When you think of this unconscious pattern, I want you to think of it like the power of God, because this is the pattern that's making it possible for you to be alive and conscious in the first place. This unconscious pattern is what's making your heart beat. It's what's making your lungs breathe. It's what's balancing your body from within. It's regulating your temperature. It's giving you all the cues on when you should do this and what you should feel like. It's basically setting up all of your predetermined routines. That's what this unconscious pattern does. And this unconscious pattern is literally trying to help you understand what it is you exist in so that you can eventually be shown the light. And that's what I'm here to do. I'm showing you the light right now, and the light means that we're supposed to take and synchronize these two patterns together. The reason this information is going to be life altering. Think with me for a minute. We had no idea as a collective population how the unconscious works. It's 83% of everything that happens to any of us. We've been functioning on 17% without understanding this, which means we've been making all kinds of mistakes in this reality that we share. Look around and confirm it for yourself. Our weather's falling apart. Our societies are in a place where it's more than a little concerning. And that just has to do with us not understanding a pattern I would describe as a godlike pattern. All right, so to tie this in with the religious aspect of what we're supposed to be doing, it's about moral balanced choice. I want you to see this right here. This is the hat or the headwear that the Pope wears. It's called a mitre, okay? And look at the shape of it. You see how it comes up and it is a Vesca Pisces. That's what it is. It would fit right here. You see how that hat would come up and it looks just like that? That is representing this shape. This shape is representing 83% unconscious. The unconscious is representing the concept of God. So understanding this pattern as if we now understand God, because God is what organizes everything in the external and everything in the internal. And now that I'm sharing how God works, you're going to realize what you're going to want to do, because there are consequences if you don't synchronize these patterns together. If you don't start to honor your rhythms, if you don't start to honor the reason that you exist, the consequences get bigger and bigger. And unfortunately, the prophets that came before me were absolutely correct. They are eternal. There is an eternal negative feedback loop, a hell-like state, and there's an eternal positive feedback loop, a heaven-like state. And the only way to get to heaven is to be shown, accept, and embrace the light. And to do that, well, we've helped you here. We've created a technology that can calculate the unconscious rhythms in your body, which will allow you to start to honor them, and will also teach you how to synchronize with the rhythms of the earth to make sure that you're honoring the earth. You do those two things, and you have now accepted the light. And when you accept the light, what you really get is you get a reward. Okay. Now, before we move on here, I want to show you how these two patterns come together. So I had them separated, but now you can see how this smaller purple pattern, or the pattern of consciousness, is actually seated within the unconscious pattern. So the unconscious pattern is controlling everything with this larger perimeter circle, and this conscious pattern, its central circle, is the smallest circle. And what this allows is it allows us to consciously learn within this unconscious construct. All right, so before we move on, there's one more thing that I got to show you here that's super cool. So the position of the Sphinx in relation to the temple had to be exact so that it would get the right proportions for the large circle of unconsciousness and the small circle for consciousness, and they match. So if we took this right here, this outer circle is the exact same size as these larger outer circles that create the unconscious Vesica Pisces. This small circle right here is the exact same size as these small circles right here that come together to create the conscious pattern. This is the proportion. The circular proportion is identical. The detail and the absolute precision to create these structures to make sure that these proportions were preserved, it melts my mind. I can't imagine what you must be thinking. This is cool stuff. Now, this is not it. There's more that has to be discussed so that you can understand how this works, but these are the core patterns that make conscious and unconscious possible. Okay, let's move on here. So what I've done here is I've put a Vesica Pisces over top of the structure that connects the left and right brain together. That's called the corpus callosum. And it's this white matter that integrates left and right brain function together. Now, the left brain is predominantly guided by this pattern right here, the purple pattern. Now, please understand that the left brain is not conscious control and the right brain is unconscious control. These two patterns are interconnected. They look just like this. But in the left brain, this is the pattern that dominates. Now, this pattern is how we find the outside, or we discover what we would call the whole. The whole is the bigger or the larger thing that we all exist within. So the left brain functions to try to figure out this outer perimeter. That's why it has a W here. When we look at the right brain, we have the same thing. A vesica piscis, that's connecting the corpus callosum that brings right and left brain function together. And the blue just means that this is the dominant pattern. So the left brain, this is the dominant pattern. In the right brain, this is the dominant pattern. And this pattern is the one where it has the outer, but it doesn't know the inner. So the S stands for self. This pattern is trying to find the inside, whereas this pattern is trying to find the outside. And what you want to do is you want to be able to find both of those things in order to synchronize. You want to find balance within, and you want to balance with the external or without. That's how this works. And that's how it's connected to the brain, how these patterns are helping us perceive big picture, small picture, external, and internal. All right, so let's take this a step further. I want to simplify this so you can understand the ratios that I was talking about with the 17% and the 83%. It's going to be reiterated with this very, very significant Egyptian symbol. This is the Eye of Ra. Now, the Eye of Ra, what it's doing is it's showing how the senses are connected to the mind or thought. So everything is color coordinated, and it actually goes along with these plutonic shapes. These are the 5 plutonic shapes that interconnect with the patterns of consciousness and unconsciousness, and it's how cognition is possible. Now, my predecessor, he preached to 5,000 people, and he fed them with 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. I'm going to preach to the entire world because now the entire world is connected, but it's going to be the exact same analogy. So the 2 fish, that has to do with the purple and the blue pattern on top of each other. And I know this looks a little confusing. I'm going to explain it here in just a minute, okay? The 5 loaves of bread have to do with the 5 perfectly symmetric plutonic shapes that are designed to connect us to the conscious and unconscious and teach us about balanced choice. Why am I saying we have to learn about balanced choice? Well, because these are the only 5 shapes in existence that have perfect symmetry. So the idea that God is perfect, if this is the construct that makes the unconscious and conscious, and then these are the shapes that interconnect them, that means that we're supposed to try to perfect ourselves, that we're supposed to become the best, most balanced version. And if we don't, what happens is we create a frequency that is not the same as the frequencies that these shapes create. These shapes create perfectly balanced frequencies. If we use our conscious choice to do anything but have perfectly balanced choice, when 2 frequencies interact, that's actually what causes either constructive interference where things get better or destructive interference where things get worse. That's how aging, that's how all of the things that we don't like happen. It happens if we don't have balanced choice. The next thing I want to do is I want to show you how each of these plutonic solids is connected to a sense. So this orange shape, the octahedron, connected to taste. Here it is right here. This is the part of the Eye of Ra that has to do with the sense taste. This is the cube, has to do with smell. This is the part of the Eye of Ra that has to do with smell. This is the dodecahedron, has to do with sight. Here it is on the Eye of Ra. And then we've got hearing. That's this part of the eye right here, or this part of the symbol. And then the last one we have to talk about is the concept of touch. That's this right here. Now, the eye with this little squiggly tail and this downward portion right here, that's 5 things. That's 5 of the plutonic shapes. And then the last one is thought. That's 6. That's a 5-to-1 ratio. A 5-to-1 ratio creates a 17% and an 83% ratio. So the 1 is 17%, that's conscious choice. And then all of the senses in our body, they're not conscious. They just work. When we're born, we have sight. When we're born, we can hear, we can taste, we can smell, we can touch. Those are all unconscious functions. So this is literally showing how the eyes connected to these 6 shapes, and they represent the percentages that we just talked about previously with the 17% and the 83%. Now, when I put the circles in here, I did it so that you could see which plutonic shape was within which circle. So you see how this plutonic shape is within the purple circle. This plutonic shape is within the red circle. This plutonic shape is in the yellow circle. This plutonic shape is in the blue. This one's in the green. This one's in the orange. The color coding just has to show you that each one of these plutonic circles correlate to one of these shapes, and they completely fill out these patterns of conscious and unconscious control. Now, the eye of Ra is the right eye, but it's controlled by the left brain. That's exactly how we're designed. That's how our consciousness works. So if we want to move our right body, it's our left brain that organizes it. If we want to move our left body, it's our right brain that organizes it. How is that happening? So these are two 7-circle patterns. One has a small circle in the center, the other has a large circle in the center. The small circle in the center is connected to the larger blue circles. That's how it finds the perimeter. So it's integrating the left mind with the blue, which would be the right body. And that's why we have the right eye that's positioned within the left brain. All right, let's move on. Let's do the next one. So this is the eye of Horus. Now, if you notice, this eye is a little different because the eye of Horus is the right brain and it's controlling the left body. Well, the left body is the smaller pattern, it's the smaller circles. So that's what this is about right here. This is about the idea that this is smaller. Now, the eye of Ra is associated with the sun, the eye of Horus is associated with the moon. The moon is the much smaller sphere. The sun is the much larger sphere. Everything that we believe to exist is all happening in our minds. There's a collective mind, and then we have our individual minds, and our minds are connected to these patterns. That's all this is. That's going to be hard for people to accept because what we believe to be reality is a mathematical construct that creates a simulated experience that we can learn in and we can actually sense and feel. It's what we are. We're sentient. So these 5 plutonic shapes connect these two patterns, and the symbolisms of these eyes are to verify the 6 plutonic shapes that come together to create the individual mind as well as the collective mind. So we're doing pretty good here, but it's time to move on because we got just a little bit more we got to understand here before we're done, okay? So we've got to bring in a little bit more geometry, and this geometry is going to explain how conscious expansion works, how consciousness is connected to unconsciousness, and the geometry that allows us to learn. And it turns out it's this 8-pointed star, the star of Christ, the star of redemption. Why would it be called the star of redemption? Because when we only know 17%, we're going to sin and make a mess of the world. But when we finally come together as a collective whole and we find this outer perimeter and we discover how God's creation is organized, we can redeem ourselves. And this 8-pointed star, what it does is it creates a pattern of 8. There's 8 cycles that we have to collectively evolve through, and the timeline that it takes to do this is ridiculous. It takes 63,360 years to get through this 8-pointed star. Now, I'm sure people recall that the Mayan civilization predicted that the world would end on December 21st, 2012. Well, on December 20th, a few hours before the winter solstice, I actually had a vision that night of this blue circle. And after I had a vision of that circle, when the Mayan predicted, I started to understand these geometric patterns and how these plutonic shapes were interconnected with it. And what had happened is we had completed this large cycle, just as the Mayan predicted. And they said it was going to be the end of the world, but it's not truly the end of the world. It was the end of us not knowing how the world is organized, and it was going to create this new beginning. Let me show you how this works, and let me show you how it's connected to these plutonic shapes. So these plutonic shapes do a lot of things. Not only do they create our senses and connect our unconscious and conscious control together, but they represent different perspectives. And because there's 2 ways to look at every one of these shapes, there's 8 perspectives you have to learn. You have to learn 4 first-person perspectives, and you have to learn 4 third-person perspectives. First-person perspectives are the interior perspectives, it's the inside, and the third-person perspectives, that's the exterior, that's the outside. Let me run through this pattern so you can see how it works. And please remember the duration of time it takes to complete this pattern. It takes a huge amount of time. So this is why civilizations have to leave structures and clues and history so that we can piece this pattern together. So at the end, we can see how everything is connected. So when cycle 1 happens, we're supposed to learn about the third person perspective of the family. When cycle 2 happens, we're supposed to learn about the first person perspective of an immature masculine perspective. So the sun is a metaphorical thing for an immature male. In cycle 3, we're supposed to learn about mature male perspective, or that masculine perspective that's more developed and refined. In cycle 4, we're supposed to learn about the concept of the world and how to balance the world from the third person perspective. In cycle 5, we got to learn about the immature feminine perspective, or the perspective that would be like a theological daughter. In cycle 6, we got to learn about the individual perspective. In cycle 7, we have to learn about the national perspective. And in cycle 8, we have to learn about the maturing feminine perspective. That's the last perspective before the pattern is complete. Now, I've also connected these shapes to the cycles of sleep and wake. So as I go through this, I'm going to back it up. And then this time when I go through, I want you to see how we go through sleep and wake cycles. So it would be the difference between going from the night to the day, back to the night, back to the day, back to the night, until we complete the pattern and we start all over again. Now, when I said we were awake, this is actually the dark, because when we're awake, we only know 17%. When we get to this side and we learn about the 83%, this is the light. This is how we understand what we currently are, because without understanding the unconscious, we can't figure out how this works. Now, when you get through this 8-step process, that's where we're at. I'm the guy that says, Bazinga, we're here. This is the answer. But even though I'm going to show you the answer, you still have to do the work, because knowing the answer is not how you pass this test. How you pass this test is you have to synchronize with all of these different frequencies. All of these different frequencies relate to different perspectives, first person perspectives and third person perspectives. And when you bring them all together, what happens is you integrate the idea of thought and touch, or you integrate this self pair, this 8-pointed star, this tetrahedron, and what we get is the reward of understanding how unconscious control works. Now, over here, I want you to see the star, the 8-pointed star of redemption, or the 8-pointed star of consciousness, or the 8-pointed star of Christ. On the opposite side, this 6-pointed star is what's organizing this pattern right here. Once this was known, this is how I was able to calculate all the unconscious rhythms in the body. So we've created a technology that uses the 6-pointed star, what's considered the star of creation. And I want to tie this to past prophecy. So all my Christians out there that want to see the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, here they are. Look it over here. This is the shape of the Father. This is the shape of the Son. And this is the pattern of the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is the spirit that organizes the unconscious side, the side we didn't know. So you see how this 8-pointed star lets us find the external perimeter. And once we find the external perimeter, we realize that the 8-pointed star that's what leads us to the 6-pointed star, the star of creation, the star of God. So the star of redemption brings us back to God, and it's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit that are organized by this pattern. This is the masculine side. This is the feminine side. In biblical context, when they say that men should lead, they're not talking about men, because men are connected to this 8-pointed star just like women are connected to it. What it means is you have to follow the unconscious pattern, the pattern of God, the pattern of morality, the pattern of balance. That's the pattern that protects you. This is the pattern that rewards you. If you want your eternal reward, then this is the pattern that you have to decide to follow. Now, to make sure that everyone is capable of earning their unconscious reward, I've created a technology that organizes your unconscious rhythms. So this is my user information. This is my birth time, the time zone I'm born in. That's all we need. And then, because I understand these patterns, I was able to put together a technology that can then predetermine the rhythms that I'll experience as long as I'm alive. I'll know when it's the best time to rest. I'll know when my rhythms are trying to get under my skin and get me to react. This is how you honor the unconscious, is when you're shown it. And if you honor these rhythms, what it's going to do is it's going to stop you from being distracted, and it's going to allow you to put your conscious choice into balancing. That's what we put together here for you. Now, the reason that we talk about increasing deep sleep, this is why. So the dodecahedron and the cube are responsible for sleep. Okay. And that's what the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit are. So if you want to be healed, what you have to do is you have to balance this perspective, this perspective, this perspective, and this perspective, but you can't neglect these either. You have to balance them all. But these perspectives are considered important because without sleep, there's no restoration. Without sleep, what happens is your body falls apart even faster. So, what you really want to do if you want to lengthen your life and you want to have the best outcomes going forward is you have to decide to serve this six-pointed star of creation, or what's called the creator star, the God-like force that makes life possible. And that's the symbolism of how this is connected. So if you're wondering what this is the time of judgment. This is the time when you understand the pattern of God, what's expected of you, and what happens if you don't do it. Now, the Health Reconnected web platform discusses everything, explains it in vivid detail, and it's going to be a little scary, but the good news is you've got a prophet of God here that understands how this works and will march you to the promised land. You just have to follow us. And to follow us, the first thing you're going to want to do is download this technology and figure out how to start using it so that we can maximize your body's capability of healing. Now, we're going to do this by showing you how to synchronize with your rhythm and how to also unify your actions and your choices in a way that's going to help everybody, because that's what God demands. That's what the unconscious pattern demands of us. Unpleasantness is coming for anybody who decides to not honor what it is you were actually designed to do. And we're here to help you minimize unpleasantness and make sure that you fulfill the requirements so that unpleasantness doesn't have to be in your future any longer. Thanks for stopping by. That was pretty fun.